Whether we like it or not, everything ends. Every movie, every TV show, every book, every song, every game, except I guess live service games, but they also usually end, just not on their own terms. We've gotten together to celebrate marvelous scenes, excellent scenes, villainous scenes, and musical scenes. But I thought, for the final one of these collaborations, or at least the last one I'm organizing, it might be fun to look at a different kind of scene. The last scene. That's right, because 2023 turned out to be the year things ended. It's the year that the DCEU ended. It's the year that the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, at least the ones led by James Gunn, ended. We saw the final adventure for John Wick, for Indiana Jones, unless they change their mind again. Shows like Succession, Barry, The Great, Ted Lasso, Reservation Dogs, Riverdale, Archer, and The Flash, and the entire CW-verse are over. Because as Tony Stark says, part of the journey is the end. What makes a great last scene? How does it tie up the story? What does it say about the rest of the work? How does it look forward? Why does the end of Paddington 2 always make you cry? What did Luke's last stand against Kylo Ren mean about the future of Star Wars? How is the ending Jaws attack foreshadowed throughout the story? Why are Spider-Man's final swings such a memorable part of the franchise? Was Oppenheimer right? So I assembled an incredible group of YouTubers for one last ride to talk about our favorite scene from whatever we wanted. Could be a movie, could be a series finale, could be a single episode of a series, and it doesn't need to technically be the last scene, just like one of the last scenes. I've compiled them all into a playlist that you could find in the description of this video, so when you're done watching this, go watch the rest of them. And we're calling it One Last Scene. Now, obviously, we're talking about the end of things, so if you've not watched the thing that the video essay is about and don't want to be spoiled, maybe don't watch that video until you do. Although I do think being spoiler-free is overrated. Either way, we've tried not to spoil too much with our titles and thumbnails so you don't accidentally see something you don't want to. Plus, this is YouTube. There are also plenty of channels already spoiling movies and shows in thumbnails, so we don't need to do that too. And like with every one of these, if you make videos and want to make one about one last scene that you love, make that video, put one last scene in the title, and send it to me over Twitter or email it to me at nandovmovies@gmail.com or find me on the Nando V Movies Discord and I will add your video to the playlist. But no rush, making these takes time. So speaking of things that take time, let's talk about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and a last scene that nobody saw coming. Because it's easy to forget that leading up to Volume 3's release, we all just assumed most of the main characters were going to die. And that has a lot to do with the story on and off camera. For starters, a lot of these superhero threequels feature a big character death. Harry Osborn dies in Spider-Man 3. Scott and the Professor die in X-Men 3. So does Quills, and Jean dies for a second time. Wolverine dies in Logan, the third solo Wolverine movie. Peggy Carter dies in Cap 3. Odin dies in Thor Ragnarok. Loki dies in Infinity War, the third Avengers movie. Aunt May dies in No Way Home. It's how these go. Why does this keep happening? Well, sometimes it's a redemptive moment. A character like Harry Osborn, who has done so much harm, needs to sacrifice himself to save someone we care about, zeroing out his story karma. And this sort of change takes time. We need to see this character develop over a few movies, and the third movie in the trilogy becomes the natural endpoint for that arc. Sometimes a character death raises the stakes. Xavier died in X-Men 3 to make things even more difficult for our heroes. Jean proved that she was capable of killing even the most powerful mutants, and therefore more dangerous than anyone the X-Men had faced yet. Thanos choking Loki has the same energy. The trickster god who tormented the Avengers years ago was easily dispatched by the Mad Titan, proving Thanos was going to be orders of magnitude more dangerous than Loki. Sometimes a death can isolate a character. Killing Peggy in Cap 3 or May in No Way Home gave our heroes fewer places to turn for guidance and made their future decisions that much more difficult. You could see any one of these playing out in Guardians. A character like Nebula could sacrifice herself to save the team as a way to balance out her past mistakes. Drax could get killed by a new enemy, proving that they can kill the strongest Guardian. Or Mantis could die on a mission, further isolating Peter from his newfound sister. And while the Guardians movies had their fair share of deaths, pretty gruesome ones at that when you really get down to it, the core team, Peter, Gamora, Drax, Rocket, and Groot were all still around, if you don't count that time they almost all got dusted, or the fact that this Groot apparently dies in Guardians 1, but like, there is still a Groot. The team had even managed to add Mantis and Nebula to the roster, so surely at least one of them was going to bite it in this movie. And if that was the whole story, I'd expect some of them to die. But when you go behind the camera, things get way more interesting. One of the first things we all knew about Guardians 3 was that in 2018, just a year after Volume 2 released, James Gunn, the creative mind behind this entire franchise, was abruptly fired by Disney after a conservative blogger unearthed some of Gunn's old tweets. And the Guardians themselves were not happy. Publicly, Chris Pratt published an open letter from the entire cast voicing their support of Gunn, but some more outspoken members of the group like Dave Bautista went even further, tweeting, "I will do what I'm legally obligated to do, but Guardians without James Gunn is not what I signed up for. Guardians of the Galaxy without James Gunn just isn't Guardians of the Galaxy." It's also pretty nauseating to work for someone who'd empower a smear campaign by fascist cyber Nazis. That's just how I feel. For many of these actors, playing the Guardians without Gunn felt like a betrayal. And yes, 9 months later, Gunn would be rehired and Guardians 3 would be back on track, but it seemed that the damage had already been done. During the firing, Gunn was courted by Warner Brothers and given the keys to the Suicide Squad, a relationship that would lead to Gunn being chosen, along with longtime producing partner Peter Safran, to lead Warner Brothers' new DC universe. So it didn't look like Gunn would be able to be involved in the MCU going forward, if not for contractual reasons, just because he didn't have time. So a lot of these actors didn't seem like they would want to come back. And then in the lead up to Guardians 3, a couple of cast members like Bautista and Saldana straight up publicly stated that Guardians 3 would be the last time they played these characters on screen. And while they gave plenty of reasons why, like their stories being done or just getting older, you could also see a world where their relationship with Disney had been so soured that they had no interest in continuing if Gunn wasn't involved. So in a world where Marvel couldn't decide which characters should die in Guardians 3, some of the actors were making that choice easy. You're never gonna see me again, so might as well use that in the story. And if that wasn't enough, after Volume 2, the Guardians cast was in the process of taking over Hollywood. Chris Pratt became one of the biggest movie stars on Earth, leading multiple successful blockbuster franchises like the Jurassic World series, the Lego movies, and a bunch of movies and shows made exclusively for dads. Months before Guardians 3 released, Pratt had just opened a Super Mario Bros. Movie that would go on to be one of the most successful films of the year. Chris Pratt was bankable, but he wasn't the only Guardian who had found success since the first movie. In 2022, Saldana opened the mega successful Avatar: The Way of Water and had 3 more Avatar movies on the horizon. Cooper was nominated for acting Oscars for American Sniper and A Star Is Born, and producing Oscars for Nightmare Alley and Joker. Bautista had small but memorable roles in Villeneuve's Blade Runner 2049 and Dune, along with roles in Glass Onion and a couple of other comedies. Vin Diesel was still Vin Diesel, the lead in the Fast saga. Karen Gillan headlined the Jumanji movies. Even newcomer Paul Clementif was set to play one of the villains in the new Mission Impossible movie just a month after Guardians 3 released. And because of this success, the Guardians cast was expensive. Bringing them all back for a Guardians 4 would cost a boatload of money. And while Volume 3 was James Gunn's last Guardians movie, I definitely don't see Disney giving up on this consistently successful team forever. Maybe it wouldn't be immediately, but I have no doubt we'll see another one of these in the next 5 years. In fact, the day I recorded this bit of the video, James Gunn gave his blessing for a Guardians Volume 4. But what does that movie even look like? After all, 4th Guardians movie doesn't necessarily need every single original Guardian, since in the comics the team is a consistently shifting roster. It would make sense that over time the Guardians of the Galaxy would become a ship of Theseus, with nearly all of the core 5 members getting replaced by new space friends. So unlike Iron Man, where I don't think Disney could make an Iron Man sequel without Robert Downey Jr., if the transition were handled well, I do think Disney could get away with and is incentivized to form a new Guardians team made of fresh faces who are less well known and cheaper. So put all this together. Narratively, character deaths make sense in this movie. The director everyone loves is leaving. Many cast members are upset with Disney. They're getting older, they're getting busy, they're getting expensive, but Disney could, in theory, make a sequel without the stars. The writing was on the wall. The Guardians of the Galaxy were going to die. So Guardians 3 starts up and immediately, things are not looking good. Quill is a mess. Rocket is depressed. Thanos is dead, so Drax's revenge quest is over. And then Adam Warlock shows up, things kick off, and characters start dying. Or they kind of do. I don't mean the characters almost die, I mean the language of filmmaking tells us that these characters died. Great example of this is Boromir's death in The Fellowship of the Ring. Our heroes are fighting with the orcs in a matchup that's difficult but not unwinnable. After all, our heroes are skilled fighters and the orcs are basically flailing around waiting to be stabbed. But there are lots of them. Focus shifts to Boromir, Merry, and Pippin, who are having about the same amount of luck with the orcs as everyone else. They're holding their own but getting tired. And visually, nothing new. Until the new enemy, the Uruk-hai, enters over the hill. Everything slows down. We see Boromir from further away. He looks smaller, weaker, vulnerable. Then slowly, the Uruk-hai draws his bow and fires a shot that hits Boromir. The music drops out, and in slow motion, Boromir notices the arrow and falls to his knees. This is the signal that the wound Boromir just sustained is fatal. The music, the slow-mo, the reaction. It's just a matter of how long before he dies. Compare that to Drax's fight during the Orgo Corps breakout. He's tossing guards into each other, making the bowling pin sound effect, he celebrates, and then everything slows down. And the music cuts out as Drax notices Master Karja with his big gun. Karja aims, quickly fires, and hits Drax dead center right through the chest. Mantis notices Drax, runs over, picks up Drax, and Drax is shot a second time. He falls over, lies motionless on the ground. In any other movie, that character is dead. And especially in this heroic moment, fighting jerk guards to get the intel necessary to save Rocket. But Drax didn't die. And that's when I realized James Gunn knew exactly what he was doing. He'd completely shattered our expectations for how a movie like this is supposed to feel. Anything can happen. When you think a character is in danger, they may survive. And with that idea comes the idea that a character who seems safe can die at any moment. James Gunn loves playing with expectations. Look at the Suicide Squad. We get some very typical dramatic deaths, like Peacemaker killing Flag or Starro killing the Thinker. But then, out of nowhere, Polka Dot Man is killed by Starro. And sure, it's not exactly out of nowhere. They're in the middle of fighting Starro and Polka Dot Man just polka dotted Starro's leg off. But it's unexpected. That moment should feel like a triumph. He's a superhero. But then, boom, he's dead. I've got a couple reads on this death. First, in that moment, James could be showing us that these guys are not superheroes. They're not bad guys either, there's something in between. And accepting that is our hero's emotional journey. Or maybe Polka Dot Man's death serves to remind us that we're not watching some traditional superhero movie. Avengers get heroic sacrifice deaths. This is just arbitrary, because anything can happen. No one is safe. Or maybe James Gunn just did it because he thought it was funny, because I could see that too. But knowing what happened to Polka Dot Man and understanding that all bets were off, I've never been so worried for every character in every scene. During the first Adam Warlock attack, a couple of characters get what could be death moments. Mantis's arm was broken and she's thrown into a wall. And while we don't know how strong Mantis was, she may not have been that strong. Then Drax goes toe-to-toe with Adam. Adam beats him to death as everyone around him cries. And again, we don't have a great sense for Drax's power level, but cinema shorthand tells us that this is the moment where a main character is killed early in the story to set some serious stakes. And it just kept going. Mantis, Drax, and Nebula all almost suffocated as the big cube flew into the sky. Peter and Groot jumped off the ship and landed on an exploding planet. Nebula plugged herself into the exploding ship to fly it. Rocket went back to save the baby raccoons. And finally, Peter pretty much exploded in space to rescue the Zune. It wasn't until the gang hugged Peter, who said, "I'm okay," that we were all actually able to breathe a sigh of relief. And that's when it dawned on us. At least that's when it dawned on me. All the Guardians survived. This movie wraps up with the Guardians deciding that they needed to go their separate ways. Peter's going home, Mantis is venturing out on her own, Nebula and Drax will stay on Nowhere to take care of the kids, and Rocket and Groot are going to lead a new generation of Guardians. Gamora says goodbye to Peter, and then we get that last scene. From the beginning, James Gunn has given a lot of thought to each song in the Guardians movies, and now that a pattern has been established in 1 and 2, Gunn was able to do some interesting things to upset it in 3. Like 1 and 2 began with upbeat songs like Come and Get Your Love and Mr. Blue Sky, while 3 starts with the acoustic version of Radiohead's Creep, one of the most melodramatic songs of its generation, setting a much more upsetting tone right off the bat. Gunn also had a much wider range of music to work with in Guardians 3, since at the end of 2, Kraglin gave Peter a Zune, Microsoft's failed iPod competitor, to replace Peter's broken Walkman. And because this Zune was a more modern device, Gunn could conceivably use songs from any time up until, I guess, the mid-2010s, when Zunes became more or less extinct. And most of the music in Guardians 3 does end up hailing from the 80s and 90s, so it is a step forward in time for the series, but in the last scene, we get the most modern Guardians song by far. A Rocket who's finally gotten closure from his girlfriend in the afterlife, defeated his tormentor, freed his fellow prisoners, learned his true heritage, and taken his place at the center of this team, is scrolling through the Zune Peter gifted him, looking for a song to pipe through nowhere. And traditionally, the song that ends the Guardians movie is also a throwback, usually in honor of a character who died during the story. Ain't No Mountain High Enough is a ballad Peter's mom is singing to him through the second tape that she made for him before her death. Cat Stevens' Father and Son is played during Yondu's funeral shortly after the revelation that Yondu is Peter's real father. And both of those songs hold a specific distinction in their respective playlists. Ain't No Mountain High Enough is the oldest song on the Awesome Mix Volume 1, and Father and Son, while not the oldest song in Volume 2, is one of the older songs, debuting in 1970. Both songs are throwbacks on an album of throwbacks designed to evoke the memory of a lost loved one. To remember what it's like as a child, being comforted by your mother or guided by your father. But Volume 3 does something different. Rocket starts in the 90s but scrolls forward to the 2000s and settles on a song we don't see, but when the familiar ukulele comes through the speakers, we all remember. Dog Days Are Over by Florence and the Machine is the newest song in the Guardians discography by far. By ending on a more modern choice, Guardians immediately sets itself apart from its predecessors. And thematically, it's because Volume 3 is a different kind of ending. The Guardians survived their threequel, all of them. They don't have anyone to mourn. They don't need any more closure. So Rocket picks a song that, relative to everything we've heard so far, feels new, fresh, forward. Dog Days Are Over is a song about moving forward. A story that in some ways speaks to every Guardian. At the beginning of this movie, they were not expecting happiness. They either didn't think they deserved it or didn't think happiness was possible. Rocket could not imagine a world where he fit in. Peter couldn't imagine a world where he could be happy without Gamora. Nebula couldn't let her guard down, Kraglin and Cosmo were fighting, and Drax couldn't dance with his surrogate daughter Mantis. In Guardians 2, we learned that Drax knew his wife Ovette was his soulmate when, during a war rally, she didn't dance. And this moment with Mantis during Volume 3's opening shows that Drax still won't. He says it's idiotic. And perhaps that's because he never danced before, or maybe just since he met Ovette. Dancing was seen as dishonoring Ovette's memory, even if it meant creating a connection with his new family. Drax could not move on. But like the song says, happiness hit them. They were all existing in a state of comfortable loneliness, running from their past, but they were violently brought together. And when Guardians 3 starts, we find a group trying to cope, hiding from happiness, wallowing in misery, obsessed with lost love. Drunk, doing whatever they can to avoid the uncomfortable journey of moving forward. Before I started looking into this video, I didn't know what dog days were, like what it meant. Apparently, it refers to the time of year when it's hot, usually between July and September. The heat can tire you out and lead to inactivity, sluggishness, stagnation. You stop moving. The dog star Sirius has come to represent this time of year, hence dog days. It's a time when you just don't do anything. And for our Guardians, those days are over. They could finally do the things they need to do. This last scene is our opportunity to acknowledge that things get better. I only went into so much detail about why each Guardian seemed like they were going to die so that you understood how unusual it was that none of them did. Because James Gunn believes better things are possible. Not without realism, but without cynicism. Gunn has been incredibly public about his struggles with drugs and alcohol. And because of that, struggles with the Guardians, especially Rocket, have been very personal. When asked in an interview with the New York Times' Kyle Buchanan about how his path from a team member at Marvel to the leader at DC is similar to Rocket's, Gunn said, "Oh, there's no doubt that my journey is similar to Rocket's. When it comes to those things, I used to push other people away. Accepting myself as I am and accepting other people's love, it's been something that I've struggled with over the years, come to terms with much more than I have in the past. Rocket has always been connected to Gunn. And not just James, because as we all know by now, Sean Gunn does the mocap for Rocket Raccoon. There are many very silly behind-the-scenes shots of Drax petting an adult man or stuff like that, which means this first shot of the last scene of Volume 3 isn't just Rocket dancing, it's Sean Gunn, James's brother who's been there since the beginning. In an interview with Nerdist, Sean said, "That was very emotional for me, but it was also very cathartic, because it wasn't some heart-wrenching stuff. We had already gone through the ringer with Rocket's story and digging in. We'd already done the digging. So in that moment, at the end, he's really just letting loose. And I was able to do the same thing. It's pretty cool. And Rocket is not dancing alone. You've got Cosmo, Kraglin, Nebula, Drax, everyone from nowhere, all the kids, and of course, Rocket's surrogate son, Groot. Played in that scene by, well, okay. You see, while Vin Diesel supplies the voice of Groot, a couple different people do the on-set work. Originally, it was an actor named Kristen Godlewski. He stood in as Groot during Guardians 1 up until original Groot's death on Xandar. Then for Volume 2, Baby Groot reference mostly came from a small model, except a post-credit scene where Sean stood in as teenage Groot. In Infinity War and Endgame, veteran mocap actor Terry Notary took over as teenage Groot. I could not find anyone credited for Groot's appearance in Love and Thunder, so I guess they didn't have anyone on set. And then in Guardians 3, Groot was played by Austin Freeman, who you may also recognize from this scene in episode 2 of season 1 of Loki. So just as Groot the character has evolved, so has Groot the performer. 4 different actors and a toy have performed as the Floral Colossus in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. And also 1 director, because every time Groot dances in the Guardians movies, that is James Gunn. In the post-credits scene on Guardians 1, in the intro of Volume 2, in the holiday special, and most importantly, in that one last scene of Volume 3, James Gunn provides the on-set reference for Groot's dancing. According to Gunn in that same New York Times interview, it was a high point in my life, really. My brother Sean is dancing for Rocket, and in the moment we were shooting the wide shot and dancing towards each other, it was surreal and beautiful and wonderful. We've been goofing around and playing with Fisher-Price characters since we were kids in our parents' basement. And now we're on the biggest set I've ever been on with gigantic Tinker toys instead of smaller ones, but with that same purity and imagination we had as kids. Everybody was crying as it was happening. It was a really powerful moment. And this is why I love these movies, and why I love this last scene, because James Gunn gets it. He understands what these movies can be. When speaking about his issues with drugs and alcohol, Gunn said he found, quote, respite in popular entertainment. Marvel Comics, science fiction, and horror films, the music of the Sex Pistols, The Replacements, and Queen. Suddenly I could see past the bland suburbs where I lived into a more magical world, a world more aligned with what I imagined. This last scene shows a world where better things really are possible. This world that Gunn created with help from Kevin Feige and with characters created by Jim Starlin, Steve Englehart, Keith Geffen, Jack Kirby, Stan Lee, and many, many others, is the kind of world that could help a kid who, like Gunn did, worries that they don't fit in or they can't find love. Gunn is showing them a world they can escape to, where things turn out okay, so they can keep moving forward. Because not every story needs to end with a grim choice between happiness and doing the right thing, with a sacrifice or a funeral. People can change, grow, celebrate, and dance. So that is my one last scene. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and if you make your own, reach out to me and I will add it to the playlist. And next time on Nando V Movies, I'm looking to the future of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I've got suggestions, 5 that could be implemented today that would solve some of their problems. Not all, but some. And that video will be on this YouTube channel eventually, but you can watch it right now on Nebula. That's right, Nebula is sponsoring this video. They're the fantastic streaming service that I helped to create. They get all of my videos early and ad-free, and also they get Jetlag, which I just got really into. I was at the premiere recently, I had a blast. If you haven't seen it, these guys compete in travel challenges. It's super funny, like Taskmaster mixed with Vacation, or I guess Road Trip. I don't know, what's this generation's road movie? Bad Trip, Green Book, Logan? Let's say it's Taskmaster mixed with Logan. And that premieres on Nebula. People love it, go watch it. Also watch my videos, let's not forget about those, they're also on Nebula. And we're constantly adding new shows on Nebula, like Broe Deschanel just started a show called Taboo on Screen, where they look at how different films handle different taboo subjects. And an annual subscription to Nebula is just $5 a month. But if you use my code NANDO at checkout, you can get Nebula for just $30 a year, which averages out to around $2.50 a month. It is an incredible deal. Tons of you guys already use Nebula and chat with me on the Discord about the videos early. I love that. Keep doing that. We're also doing something really cool. Nebula is offering lifetime memberships. So instead of a subscription, it is a one-time payment that will get you everything Nebula offers forever. You can completely opt out of price increases and monthly charges and enjoy Nebula for as long as you and Nebula both exist. And no, Nebula is not going bankrupt. On the contrary, we're doing very well. We're offering lifetime memberships for select few fans so that we can make even more original stuff. Huge productions from your favorite creators. And we are in it for the long haul. Lifetime memberships allow us to not take on outside investors. It's the opposite of a going out of business sale. It is a going into even more business sale. So you can get Nebula for life for just $300. No tricks, no gimmicks, that's it forever. And if that's not your speed, that is completely fine. You can still get the 40% discount that averages out to a little less than $3 a month. And if you want to pay monthly, you have that option too. So go to go.nebula.tv/Nando to sign up. As always, I want to give a huge thank you to everybody that is making videos as part of this playlist. I love you all. Thank you to everybody that continues to support the channel on Patreon, everybody that listens to my podcast, mostly Nitpicking, and everybody that follows me on Twitter, Instagram, Twitch, all that stuff. I'm Nando V Movies on all those platforms. That's all I got. Stay safe, and I'll see you next time.